Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal priest here in Austin, Texas. Glad you're joining us. And if you're new to the channel or to the podcast, please go to our website. It's called Two-Way Prayer. Sign up there for a newsletter and learn about the kind of prayer they did in early AA that is kind of making a comeback. And I think you'll find it fascinating. I know I did. We are starting a new series here. Did the first episode last week. This is the second, and it's titled Spiritual Evolution. And we're looking at a book. The book was written by Dr. George Vaillant, and he was a researcher, psychiatrist at Harvard University. Also served as a non-alcoholic trustee for Alcoholics Anonymous. So he knows his science and he knows his recovery stuff. I think you'll find his book really, really interesting. And I think the book has a lot to offer anybody who's interested in spirituality from maybe more of a scientific point of view. But here's the problem. The first few chapters of George's book are a little bit complicated. They're kind of rough going for some. I know they were for me, but I don't want that to discourage you from reading it, because just kind of sail through it, get what you can. He's going to be describing the brain and scientific studies and all of that sort of stuff that are going to back him up in his premise. And this is what's important, is that spirituality is about positive emotions. And ultimately that AA and the 12-step journey is particularly well suited for helping us come to those emotions. So a better understanding of what spirituality is about is what we're going to be looking at in this series. Stay with us. It's worth the journey. Now, in this episode, I'm going to try to do my best to simplify George's map of the human brain. But his brain evolved a lot further than mine in many areas. And science really isn't my strong suit, okay? But science and spirituality really kind of go right to the heart of the struggle that I think many of us face, particularly when we're first coming into recovery. And it's a subject that gets addressed in the big book, in chapter 4, the chapter on we agnostics. Wilson and many of the pioneers, I think they faced kind of a similar struggle that they were going on even back in the 30s. Eh? Is this spiritual approach real? Is this God thing real? Am I just fooling myself with all of this spirituality stuff? And Big Book says that, I'll quote, hey, the practical individual of today is a stickler for proof. But it goes on to say that visual proof, science demonstrates, is the weakest of proofs. And that outward appearances may not be inward reality at all. Then he goes on to talk about electrons spinning inside of steel girders. Eh? What Vaillant gives us in this book is a picture of the inward reality of the brain and what is going on inside of it. And science has come a long way since 1939. When the big book was written, And what I think the great, vast majority of scientists would tell us today is that alcoholism, drug addiction, they're brain chemistry diseases or illnesses. Parts of the brain are hijacked, taken over by the drug, and the things that are driving us towards more destructive drinking and using. If you'll understand the brain chemistry that's going on, this is the stuff that's driving us. And what Vaillant is pointing to here, he'd say that that's true, but that there are also parts of our brain that are evolving and are the home to spirituality. That spirituality isn't some loosey-goosey up there in the clouds kind of thing. It's really something that is happening in our brains. And he wants to kind of give a picture of that. And in order to do so, he has to kind of lay out the geography But don't get lost over that. I mean, the good part of this series, I think, will be the next several episodes where we look at the different component parts that Vaillant says go into making up what spirituality is all about. Okay. When we talk about a spiritual awakening, for him, it isn't seeing God or hearing voices. It's growing in the positive emotions that compose spirituality. For him, what are they? He lists them. I don't know that these are definitive, but he lists them as faith, growing in faith, growing in love, growing in hope, growing in joy, growing in forgiveness and compassion, and a few other things that we'll touch on in the upcoming episodes. But for now, put on your scientific smocks, and we're going to go into the operating room and look at the brain, okay? So first thing he starts off saying is that science is convinced that human brains are evolving over time, and they've been doing so for hundreds, thousands of years. Eh? And what Vaillant argues is that nature favored the brains of our ancestors who made room for spirituality to reside and to grow. In other words, spirituality was built into us. Some of them monkeys were earmarked for growth and change and going a different route. And we are the ones who come in after them. So what happened to those guys? That's what he's going to try to show us. Okay. And to do so, he's going to make use of three areas of science that are relatively new, and they really last 20, 30, 40 years. And those are what? Neuroscience, mapping the different parts of the brain, cultural anthropology, studying how, in his interest for spirituality, how different cultures approached it, that there's a commonality to the different religious traditions. There may be a lot of differences in the theology, in the literature, in the thinking part of the brain, but at the emotional level, there's a lot of commonality. So cultural anthropology is studying the likeness of humans all over the world. Hey, I was at Columbia. I had a chance to take a course from Margaret Mead, and gosh, my advisor said, "No, I'll take a different one." I always regretted that. Margaret Mead was one of the pioneers in that whole field. Anyway, I'm over that resentment. Finally, the third area of science that he brings to the table is ethology, the scientific study of animal behavior, Jane Goodall and that kind of thing. What's going on with those apes? What is happening? I mean, golden retrievers. Why do they wag their tails? What's going on there? And anyway, roughly, and I mean very roughly, that's part of and that means that parts of our brains are designed to house ideas, and separate parts are designed for processing emotions. And ideally, the two sections should work together, use one part for one, quickly switch over to the other when that's what's called for. And it's kind of seamless if it's going right. Eh? But there are big differences between the different areas of the brain. And mostly it's the left hemisphere of the brain that specializes in details, pinpoint accuracy. Somewhere I read, not in this book, but it's like when you're getting ready for an animal's getting ready to pounce, it is into its left brain. What's the situation? I'm ready to go. So details, and it's evolved to specialize in that area. So that's left brain. Right brain, pretty much things are inarticulate. While in the left brain, you're going to have understand words and component parts, language, scientific analysis. Religious beliefs and theology are processed in the left brain. This is important. Spirituality is not about denominational beliefs. All right. Those are one part of the brain, but that's not the part of the brain that's really evolving and changing. That's over on the right hand side, and what's going on there. Things like music, visual images. He references the gestalt, the wholeness of the situation, insight, imagination, able to grasp things, but maybe not put them into words, at least not easily. So this side is nonverbal, pays attention to context, empathy, and is also related to the minds of others. It responds to facial recognition. And I think a lot of us addicts, we're very sensitive people. And I think this is the part of the brain that's operating in that. What's going on in the room? A lot of us are paranoid for good reason, but what's happening here? What's happening? Look around the room. Is it safe? Is it safe? What am I feeling? Vaillant says ideas, they're neutral, they're colorless, they're valueless. So this is the scientific side. They don't elicit, bring out sensation, conscious sensation. But the emotions, these are felt physically, they're in the body, and they can't be rapidly turned off. Get a good resentment and you watch that thing, it's going to stay with you and drive you. And now I got to think about it this way, think about it that way. Emotions, he says, have color. That I'm red with anger, I'm green with envy. When I'm depressed, I'm blue. We're relating at a different level when these things are operating. And he says emotions can be negative or they can be positive. They can be good or they can be bad. And negative emotions, he says, primarily they're helpful for our survival. Fear, anger, they help us to survive. Go back to the dinosaur days, that sucker is really big and I am scared and I'm getting the hell out of here. All right. Very helpful for survival. Positive emotions, these are more relaxed, more peaceful, and they're often relegated, he says, to areas of expression that include religion and art. That this is the area that we're going to express them in music, in art, in poetry, even if I am using the words. Anyway, modern science is now locating the positive emotions in an area of the brain that scientists are really beginning to explore in some depth. And they call it the limbic system. And you can look that up and study it more, and you'll get a better sense of what it is he's talking about here. This inner system, as I understand it, can include both the left and the right sectors. It's really layers of the brain, and that the brain is divided into several layers that have evolved over the course of many millions of years. And each of these layers, they don't go away, but when a new layer comes, it builds itself upon the old one. And the brain grows over time. As we say in the program, some of our brains grow slowly and some quickly, but they're all growing. They're all growing in there. And the first, the kind of the lowest form in terms of its age is what's called the reptilian or the lizard brain. And this is the most primitive. It's what we evolved from. And this part of the brain goes back some 200 million years. It controls what? Breathing, heart rate, muscle reflexes. It just does its thing. It's not really thinking, but yet it is, but at a very primal kind of level. And when this part of the brain is stimulated, the results are what we call instincts, specifically instincts designed to help us survive. Vaillant notes that these instincts are completely selfish. Make a note of that. They're completely selfish. And that's important. They're designed to react to the moment and to keep us alive. But what are they? They're all about me. All right. And maybe intuitively, Wilson in the Big Book kind of builds on this. He says, a Big Book talks about instincts gone astray, uh, instincts in collision, you know, and scientists talk about four primary instincts that are going on: to fight, fright, four F's they call them: fright, fight, feed, and pardon the expression, fornicate. Or we can use the more common word for that. Some scientists do. But these are just kind of basic drives, and maybe kind of what life was all about before recovery. Fighting in the bars, scared to death of the cops, eating and fooling around, or all that sort of stuff. It was very basic, very kind of not very advanced, shall we say? All right. And anyway, this part of the brain is extremely powerful. Hey, but this is kind of interesting. It's only the size of a fingertip. And Vaillant says it's the brain that's in a crocodile, and it's a brain that's also in human beings, and that neither of us would survive very long without it. But if you're letting it drive you, you're going to stay at the crocodile level, huh? So in humans, there's been an evolution going on. And part of the brain system that's been changing and evolving, and it's even been growing. It's actually doubled in weight over the last 200 million years, okay? And this is known as the limbic system, okay? And it synthesizes information from the body, past memories, passes and processes information on to other parts of our brain as thought and motivation. But maybe even more importantly, it provides our human connection. And this is where I start to get interested. Because for those of us who have felt disconnected in our illness, I want you to pay attention, because this is where the problem is. And it's also where the solution is going to come. There's an AA old timer who used to say, the problem is separation. The solution is joining. The problem is disconnection. The solution is joining. So there's a part of our brain that is geared now to help us join, to become a part of. And this is all centered in this limbic system, okay? So it's the most recently evolved part of the brain, and its size relative to our bodies distinguishes us from other mammals. I mean, we've got more growth in this area than others, than other animals, than chimps and gorillas and that kind of thing. We've evolved further. And I'm going to read a quote from him. It's kind of fun. He says, vanity has led us to place our more noble emotions within its huge conscious reasoning embrace. But our vanity has misled us. Many dogs, admittedly having been selectively bred by humans for these qualities, radiate trust, hope, forgiveness, and love. And some very brilliant scientists and theologians do not. When a beloved woman is weeping, both golden retrievers and 2-year-old children will rush thoughtlessly, speechlessly, but emphatically to her side to do what? To provide comfort. You can just see a little 2-3-year-old kid seeing mother or father in tears, and just intuitively come over and touch them, embrace them. Eh? In contrast, he says, he finishes up, her highly educated physician may piously suggest over the phone, take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. One joined, one did not. And I want to kind of pause and take a look at this in terms of what it means for us, because when a drunk or an addict comes to a meeting, what is it they are met with? I mean, are they just handed a book? Here's the big book. Take it, read it, call me if you have a question. Or is something different going on? Is there something visceral that's happening in that encounter? Is there a joining that's going on? Something in the group that they can sense, something that the speaker is talking to them. It may be very guarded, but the antenna are up. Hey, someone is reaching out to them. They're watching them closely. They're watching their eyes. Is this BS or is this real? The treatment center where I got sober, they had 5 Saint Bernard dogs running around the place. All right. Through the hallways, you'd meet them. Guys in treatment would come, pet them, talk to them, and those dogs were probably more responsible for getting guys sober than many of the counselors who might have been less well developed in their own limbic systems. So when I was in Africa, I was thinking about this, Sherrod. I was in the Peace Corps, and my alcoholism was raging, and I wound up being seen by a psychiatrist over there. And I met him in an office, and he's behind the desk, and sitting next to him are 2 assistants, or maybe they were trainees. I'm not sure what. One on his left, one on his right. It was a big desk separating us. It was cold. It was inhuman, and I felt like a specimen being analyzed. There was no connection. There was no humanity. And there sure as hell were no hugs. And how many people trained in helping people are taught, don't touch, don't hug. Well, there's something powerful that happens in there. And I understand that they can be inappropriate too, and that's terrible. But what did I get instead of a hug, which is probably what I really needed? I got drugs. Here, take this, and I did, and I drank too. It did say don't drink on top of it, but I figured by then he didn't know what the hell he was talking about. Anyway, mammals, or at least some mammals, have evolved. And now remember, what we're interested here is kind of tracking spirituality, the power of positive emotions, their power to heal, the power to be awakened in us, emotions that we can respond to, develop, evolve, and share. And what we're going to respond to are not going to be cold, hard, even true facts. We're going to respond to love. We're going to respond to hope. We're going to respond to joy. We're going to respond to forgiveness. And the thing that we respond to most, where I think we melt, is when we're in the presence of unconditional love. It just has the power to change us at very deep levels. And to me, that is one of the main reasons that I've found two-way prayer so effective. That, am I listening to God? Well, I don't know. But you are listening to unconditional love. You're putting yourself in the presence of unconditional love. You're finding that unconditional love is actually a part of yourself. And now that part of yourself is speaking to the part of yourself who really needs to grow, to change, to evolve. I can't tell you how many times when I've listened to the two-way prayers of individuals, I hear God saying to them, come here. Let me just sit with you. Let me hold you. Let me just hold you. It's not very theological, but it's very emotional and it's very healing. This is the part of me that really needs to grow and has grown some over the years, but typically women do it a hell of a lot better than men, and my wife does it better than me. But sometimes she'll just say that, "Hey, stupid." She calls me that quite lovingly. Just hold me. I just want to be held. Well, there's a part in each of us that just wants to be held. And that part evolution favors. That part that can respond to that can love, all right, and can transmit love, is what's going to evolve. So Vaillant gives a nice example here. He talks about the high-pitched cry of separation that comes from a baby chimp or from a baby human, and how evolution has stepped in and responded. Here's what he says. Evolution has led to an intricate, three-boned apparatus in the inner ear that permits rodent mothers, rats, mice, rodent mothers, to hear their separated infants' high-pitched cries. Cries which are inaudible, can't be heard by predator birds and reptiles with a less evolved hearing apparatus. The separation cry presupposes a hardwired emotional trust in a maternal protector who will feed you and protect you, a maternal guardian who, unlike the father reptile or the mother fish, will not just find you and gobble you up. There used to be an assigned position in AA home groups when I first came into the program, I first got sober, along with the coffee maker and the cleanup crew and the treasurer. There were what they called greeters. And greeters were assigned to meet everybody at the door, shake their hand, say, welcome, glad to see you. I still see it in Canada, not so much in the States, but I don't know. I guess they're evolving better up there than we are down here. It seems to be true in some areas. Uh, but anyway, think about it. Eh? Spiritual connection is being realized, and parts of our brains are responding. And if they could put us in an MRI or whatever those machines are, they would see parts of our brain starting to light up. That's this part in us. And what's the big book say? It says the great reality is within. And it doesn't mean that God's in there sitting on top of your lung or next to your heart. It means that he is physically with us and growing us. That's what it means to me. Hey, so scientists now know that there are pleasure centers in the brain, and these can certainly get activated in addiction. They really go to the heart of what the brain chemistry and such is responding to when I get hooked on alcohol or on drugs, and we can get stuck there. Our lizard brains get hijacked, and we think. Tell me if this isn't true. If I don't get that drink, I'm gonna die. If I don't get that drug, I'm going to die. If I don't get that candy bar, whatever the hell the addiction may be, I'm going to die. Screw reason. I give in to the addiction. That's the force that's operating in our minds. And reason, good luck. It's going to take something more powerful than reason to change that. How many addicts say, oh, I know I should stop. I think I'll do that tomorrow. You know, they need to be changed. So he makes this point, and we'll get into this more and we go a little further, that there are centers of the brain that are connected to moral behaviors, centers of the brain that respond to the spiritual positive emotions. And as these newer parts of the brain evolved, our brains had to expand, they had to get bigger. They had physically to grow bigger. And this had consequences, all right, physical consequences and social consequences. So let me quote from Vaillant again. He says, to pass through the birth canal, primates with relatively larger brains needed to be born prematurely. So in other words, the brain's going to grow. So we got to get you out of the womb quicker. And you're not ready to kind of hit it running. Sometimes you'll see a picture, a video of a cow being born or a camel or something like that. And they come out and they are ready to ride. You know, they're ready to go. They've evolved in the womb much more so than has the baby. And that's because the scientists are telling us the brain, if it gets too big, it will never get out. So, and this necessitates also, he says, a nurturing community. So it's not just the mother and the child, it's the whole community that now has to gather around this kid and protect and nourish and help grow. And we human beings take years and years and years to mature. Some of us make it, some of us don't. But emotional maturity. Wilson wrote a really nice piece about this. And I'll try to put that in the show notes too. How important it was that this is the next stage of growth, emotional maturity. Grow up, all right? Mature. Vaillant says, the brain complexity necessary for the continuing evolution of unselfish love required a still larger brain that prolonged childhood still further. And the longer the childhood, the larger and more unselfish was the brain required, not only by the child's parents, but also by the child's surrounding clan. Thus, our ancestral primate brains began to expand at an accelerating rate. 2 tablespoons of gray matter were added every 100,000 years. By the time the cerebral topping off had finished, and it may not have, the human cortex had more than doubled in volume. Arguably, no organ in the history of life has evolved faster. So there's the brain evolution in a real nutshell, hey? And if I screwed it up, any neuroscientists out there, did the best I could. But then he turns, and I'm not going to go into this deeply, he turns to cultural evolution, because that's something that's going on too. And he notes that as you live day to day, life is pretty mundane. Lizards don't have a lot to look forward to. They don't keep a diary or any of that sort of stuff. But if you have a past, however, now you begin to ask, where did I come from? And if you have a future, you begin to wonder what will happen to me after I die. Reality becomes replaced by awe. And I now need to relate to this other, to the sacred, to the dimension that I know I'm a part of, and yet intuitively, hey, but I can't understand it. I wish to hell the big book had said, God as we don't understand God. Because I've seen so many people try to waste their time trying to understand God. Forget it, you know? But this is where he says reflective spiritual life begins. And he traces some of that as he looks at cultural evolution, consciousness starting to expand. And while it does have a hell of a long way to go, he believes that over time, it has grown in positive directions and it's moving away. We can still see this, but there are some relapses that are certainly happening. They're going on now, where we're moving away from tribal and doctrinal and religious focus towards an increased focus on spirituality, on joining. What's common to all religions? How can we come together? And if you'll study AA's history, that's what it was all about. How do I forgive and move on and learn to love? And that's what the four absolutes were all about. Hey, anyway, Vaillant's final chapter, it is on AA, and it shows how it bridges some of the divides by staying focused on spirituality and on joining, and not on doctrines and dogmas that can separate and divide us. And the last thing we need to do is turn AA and other 12-step programs themselves into doctrines and dogmas. And you must. They need to be loving, accommodating, receiving cultures that take us where we are, nurture us along, and don't give up on us. Eh? The final one that Vaillant speaks about, and that's the spiritual evolution that goes on inside the life of each and every individual. It doesn't always happen, but it can happen, and you see it happen. And this is where individuals are also evolving. And this is what his last chapters are going to be about. So, but he says what? Over the course of a lifetime, and certainly over the course of our recovery, how do we change? How do we grow? How do we evolve spiritually? And this is what he's going to get to. We come in one person, but if we stay that same person, it's not going to happen to us. I have seen a guy I know who got sober before I did, and I heard him tell his story. Okay. And it was a funny story. It was a good story. It was his AA story. But then I heard him tell his story 40 years later. And you know what? It was the same damn story. The man had not evolved. Merton said a thing. He said, if your God is the same after 5 years, your concept of God, your image of God, your relationship with God, something's wrong. It needs to be evolving. All right. So don't let that word scare you. All right. Anyway, I think that's enough. Hope I didn't do too much damage here. I think if you'll stay with this series, if you buy the book, just go quickly through the first 3 or 4 chapters. Get what you can. Don't worry about it. Skip the big words. Get the basic idea, and then move on. I'm hoping this series will evolve, I guess. Okay, that as we study the positive emotions, those areas in our lives that are waiting to change, waiting to grow, waiting to evolve. Hey, what are they? Faith, hope, love, joy, forgiveness, compassion. And the amazing thing is, one of the nice things about Vaillant was he also oversaw a long-term study program at Harvard that traced people for the course of their whole lives. And he would see some people that the clinicians would say, clinically impossible. Clinically impossible. With the things this guy or gal has going against them, they ain't got a prayer in hell. Well, personal evolution can happen. People change, all right? And the room for change is in this program. I think it's phenomenal. I mean, it's just endless. But don't get caught up. Don't get caught up in the left brain. I mean, it's a great place to begin. It's a terrible place to end. So work those right brains, grow, change, more will be revealed. Come back next time. I think we're going to dig into faith or hope or love or one of those good things, but we're going to leave the brain behind. Thanks for listening. God bless. Keep coming back.